Welcome. My name is LaShonda McClain. I am CEO and founder of Songs of Solomon's Intimate Fantasy Apparel. That is my online lingerie company created with wives in mind. But you guys are here for Kingdom Talks Live's after party. This is our after party Facebook group that we have in connection to Kingdom Talk Live that airs every fourth Saturday at 11 a.m. Our after party, our KTL after party group, we give interviews about different people, different things that's going on in the community with different ministries and different organizations, just so we can do what we say we tend to do in Kingdom Talk Live, which is making connections biblically, spiritually, mentally, and financially. These last few weeks, I'm sure everybody is aware of DJ Twitch, right? When I heard of his suicide, it really shook me, along with, I'm sure, millions of other people in America. And I actually share an Instagram group with my mom and my sister, and we were discussing the topic of, the events that happened with him and his family, because it seemed like what it would be to us out of nowhere. So this time we want to make sure to get together, me and my sister, Stephanie Herriott, let me toggle her on, and give her interview with NAMI, the organization in Greater Cleveland, Ohio, which stands for National Alliance Mental Illness, with one of the coordinators of NAMI. We're going to give an interview with him. But before we get into his interview with Stephanie, I wanted to share with you guys the clip that my sister asked, the question that actually ignited this whole interview in the first place. Okay, so hold on, you guys. Let me share it with you.
So like in life, I'm sure you probably like have people that have done this that you know of, have heard of, and like I've had people that I've either worked with that have done it, or like just friends from school, people you hear about. So it's like when people say like, oh, check on your people, how do you, you know what I'm saying? How do you know? How do you like know if people are so good at masking stuff? Like, what is it? Is it a certain word? Are you good? Because normally people will be like, yeah, I'm good. Oh yeah, everything's fine. It's like, how do you really like be like, you know what? They on high alert. They on red alert. They need somebody, like, how can you even tell? That's the part that gets me. Like, how do you know? Like, do you just straight up be like, hey man, don't even think about taking your life because your mama gonna be pissed. The kids gonna miss you. Like, do you just straight up talk to people like that if you stay depressed? Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't get how you supposed to talk to someone that you might pick up that they might be depressed. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it's such a sensitive topic, but it be happening. It happens all the time.
So you guys, that was the actual question that my sister was asking after the event with DJ Twitch. And if you guys heard, like I heard, the major thing that she was highlighting was, how do you know? How do you know? And when she asked me that, I didn't even know how to answer that question. It's the question that we all ask ourselves, especially when this happened. How do you know when someone is getting to that point where they feel so lost and empty that they want to take their own life? It's a very dark situation, but we have to bring light to the conversation. And I'm so thankful and happy that we actually have someone from NAMI, the National Alliance Mental Illness Organization. His name is Matt Gesicki. He's going to be actually sharing with us some information. He's the coordinator of outreach and education there. He's going to be sharing with us what we can do, what we can ask, or answering our questions. And Miss Stephanie Herriott, our sister Stephanie Herriott, is going to be actually conducting this interview. So let me go ahead and introduce, or either just bring on, Mr. Matt Gesicki. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I know you got a chance to hear the clip with my sister, and I'm thankful that you agreed to this interview. So I would love if you could please just give us some insight. How do we know, Matt? How do we know?
Sure. So, I think there's two pieces to this question. One is if someone may be considering suicide, what are the warning signs? And also, how do you approach them? So it's really important to be aware of common warning signs of suicide. Some examples of that include increased alcohol and drug use, aggressive behavior, withdrawal from friends, family, the community, social isolation, dramatic mood swings, impulsive or reckless behavior, collecting and saving pills or acquiring a weapon, giving away possessions, tying up loose ends like organizing personal papers or paying off debts, and saying goodbye to friends and family. These are all classic warning signs that someone may be considering suicide. Now, if you're seeing someone in your life that's exhibiting those signs of the contemplation of suicide, a simple way to approach this is to ask the question, are you considering suicide? Asking about suicide does not plant the idea of suicide in the head of a person who may be depressed. That's a common myth or misconception, that asking about suicide makes someone more likely to attempt suicide. And if they are considering suicide, you can ask follow-up questions. Do you have an idea of how you would take your life specifically? This is a classic way of kind of differentiating active ideation versus passive ideation, which would just be someone in the heat of a moment saying, oh, I just wish I was dead because they're so stressed out. That's different. Do they have a plan? Do they have a timeline? Do they have access to lethal means of taking their life? Do they have people that they can reach out to when they're feeling suicidal? Do they have a safe place that they can be with another person when they're feeling suicidal? These are all ways in which you can kind of informally for yourself get a feel for what their safety level is and what their level of risk is. But of course, always the other option here is to help them find referral to a mental health provider that can provide additional assistance. But those are some of the very easy steps that we can all take to recognize if someone in our life may be contemplating suicide.
Wow, that is so good, Matt. So, what is suicide?
Suicide would be death that is caused directly by injuring oneself with the intent to die, right? There could be an accidental death, but the important piece there is that there must be an intent to die by injuring oneself. And a suicide attempt is when someone harms themselves with any intent to end their life, but they do not die as a result of their actions. That would be the classic definition of suicide.
Wow. Who's at risk for suicide, according to research that you have so far?
Yeah, so the category of person that is most at risk for suicide is a person with a known mental health condition. There are other risk factors associated with suicide, which could include a family history of suicide, substance use, which can sometimes exacerbate thoughts of suicide. A person who's intoxicated may be more likely to attempt suicide while intoxicated. Access to firearms, a serious chronic medical illness. Gender is also associated as a risk factor. Although more women attempt suicide, men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide. So their attempts are more, men tend to have more successful suicide attempts than women. A history of trauma or abuse may also be a risk factor. Exposure to prolonged stress, and also a recent tragedy or loss. Someone that experiences a traumatic grief or experiences a trauma in the community, after a mass shooting, for example. The grief from those losses may be more likely to lead to a suicide attempt.
I want to go back to, you mentioned substance use that are associated more with suicide, like certain drugs more associated with people who commit suicide than others, or is it just because I know we have this whole legalization and marijuana is good for certain, medical conditions. For you to kind of touch on maybe if there are any direct drugs tied to suicide.
So, yeah, I don't have any information on specific drugs, but I will say that we know that drug use can create more intense mental or emotional highs and lows, which could increase suicidal thoughts. And the CDC analysis from the CDC indicates that around 1 in 5 people who die by suicide had alcohol in their system at the time of death. So this is why we talked about at the beginning, knowing the warning signs of suicidal behavior. We mentioned increased alcohol and drug use. So there is evidence, from the CDC that suggests that there can be a correlation there, in addition to the mental health condition that they're experiencing, the depression, the recent trauma or loss, the access to weapons and all of that.
This is so informative, Matt. Thank you so much. So does asking someone, as LaShonda's sister indicated, maybe speaking with someone and you may feel like, okay, this person is contemplating suicide, asking someone, just being straightforward with them, increase or put that suicide in their mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that is a common myth about suicide. Asking someone if they are considering suicide does not plant the idea in their head. In fact, asking a person about suicide is more likely to make them open up if they are truly experiencing suicidal ideation. And it is not likely to make someone consider it if they were not already considering it. In fact, I would go further and say that asking about suicide and making suicide a topic that it is socially acceptable to speak about openly, it's kind of a taboo topic in our society, but making it okay to talk about openly can in fact open the door to an open and candid conversation about a person's suicidal ideation, because I would say it's communicating to the person that we're open to talking to them about what they may be experiencing. We're not afraid to address the suicide issue with them.
Right.
So never be afraid to ask that question.
Wow. I know, even just hearing, I'm like getting jitters in my heart. I different people on different levels, but it's gives me more of a sense of peace to say, if see that someone may be struggling in this area, it's okay. It's not a taboo to bring it up and say, hey, are you considering suicide? Have you ever had thoughts? And even us just doing this topic made me really just even talk to my children, about, their thoughts. And they were able to even ask me, had I ever committed suicide? So this is definitely a timely topic and the audience, but it's also for the host and co-host as we are processing through. So are there certain groups of suicide rates than others?
So, yeah, so I have some statistics on this. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 14, and the third leading cause of death among those aged 15 to 24 in the United States. So we can see that young people are at especially high risk for suicide. Suicide is the 12th leading cause of death overall among all Americans in the United States. 46% of people who die by suicide had a diagnosed mental health condition at the time of death. However, 90% of people who die by suicide may have experienced symptoms associated with a mental health condition, according to interviews with family, friends, and medical professionals. It just may not have been diagnosed at the time of death. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are nearly 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than straight youth. 79% of people who die by suicide are male. I mentioned before that men are more likely to have successful suicides than women. And transgender adults are nearly 9 times more likely to attempt suicide at some point in their lifetime compared to the general population. So annual prevalence of serious thoughts of suicide by U.S. demographic groups, 4.9% of all adults, 11.3% of young adults age 18 to 25, 18.8% of high school students, and 45% of LGBTQ youth. We can see that young people and members of the LGBTQ community are especially at risk. Men are at risk. And another population that I did not mention here, but which is true as well, is veterans, especially veterans who have diagnosed PTSD or major depression or substance use disorder. Typically, these are veterans who have traumatic experiences from combat or sexual assault in the military. So veterans are also at risk for suicide, and organizations like the VA do extensive suicide prevention outreach and suicide prevention initiatives to address that issue among the veteran population.
Speak to this, but you know, when we talk about our children, our baby, the future, like what if um are in taken when it comes to children and maybe schools or any type of that you know of that are um you know awareness to this topic, especially when it comes to our children.
I think that the most important piece is providing more mental health education in our schools. I'm happy to see, I'm a millennial. I'm turning 31 next month. When I was in middle school and high school, I never had any kind of presentation on mental illness or suicide. It was a taboo topic. I was in a Catholic school, and I am now, as an employee, as a professional working as a mental health advocate, I am happy to see more and more schools, private schools as well as public schools, providing evidence-based mental health education for their student body and for their faculty and for parents and caregivers. One of the areas for growth, though, I feel, is some of our schools are so, especially in public schools, are so divested by the government and by community that there are no full-time school counselors at some schools. And that needs to change because those individuals are qualified to provide a focus on the mental and emotional and social well-being of their student body. And that should not be a optional or kind of, it shouldn't be seen as a bonus position to have a school counselor. It should be a necessity. It should be essential, since those are the individuals that are in a key position to recognize when young people at their schools may be at risk.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Definitely more of a wraparound service approach model, because as we can see based on the statistics that you were able the research and provide that, mental health is people across the board, starting with our babies on up. So definitely, that's something that we can consider, and we can too for myself and people who are watching, who will be watching this video. We need more advocacy for things in the school, maybe social workers, counselors, even case management, to be able to help tie of a service model to our schools, especially, it doesn't matter, inner city or suburban schools, everybody's being affected by you for that. Now, do people let me rephrase that. Do people threaten suicide? Do you think people threaten and use throw the word suicide around, or should we take it seriously when someone is saying that?
Yeah. So this is another one of those kind of insidious myths or misconceptions about suicide. So I would say that this misconception that people threaten suicide to get attention or to manipulate others is rooted in stigma and negative perceptions about mental illness that suggests that people who are experiencing depression or anxiety or suicidal ideation kind of use those symptoms as attention-seeking behavior. My response that I would have to that is that any indication of suicidal ideation or suicidal behavior should be taken seriously, because the alternative of ignoring it could be devastating in its consequences, right? If we refuse to take someone's suicidal ideation seriously, and then, they attempt or they complete suicide, we're left to live with that. And so we want to take all indications of suicidal behavior and ideation seriously.
Okay. What treats and therapies are available?
Yeah, so any qualified licensed mental health professional is competent to provide a basic suicide assessment with their clients. But I can offer some particular suggestions on the most effective evidence-based treatments for mental health conditions that may have suicidality as part of their symptoms. So for something like major depressive disorder, or major depression, in which suicide is that could be a common symptom, suicidal ideation, as well as bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. These are also conditions where suicidal behavior can be common. The most evidence-based forms of therapy that you can look for, and I can talk a little later about how you can find treatment providers. But the most evidence-based forms of therapy for these conditions would be cognitive behavioral therapy, very common, very popular, called CBT, or dialectical behavior therapy, which is DBT. So you can search online for therapists that are trained in CBT or DBT, and these are the most evidence-based treatment methods for depression, bipolar, and borderline personality disorder.
When we're talking about treatment and therapy, and I know associated with that, in my experience, I have heard that, they stop taking their medicine, maybe the way the medicine made them feel. Have you heard, or in your practice and in your expertise of dealing with NAMI?
Yeah, so medication compliance is like a huge issue in like the consumer and family side of mental health treatment. So it is unfortunately common for the more intensive psychotropic medications that people take for illnesses like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia to experience some adverse side effects like weight gain or brain fog or sexual dysfunction, or there's something else that you can get from antipsychotic medications of an older order called tardive dyskinesia, which causes like involuntary twitches and spasms and movements, especially of the mouth and face, but also of the limbs. And these side effects can be a deterrent for people to remain on their medications. So medication compliance is an area for ongoing education by prescribers and by families. I'd also say that, yes, especially in the case of something like bipolar disorder, a person may feel the euphoria of their manic episodes as an important part of their personality, especially if they feel really empowered or creative when they're manic. And so they may miss that experience, even though it can lead to dangerous situations that end up with hospitalization. They may miss those feelings that they had when they were manic and may want to go off of their medication because of that. So it's an ongoing issue that NAMI tries to be an especially important resource for. Our community is just providing that education and support on the value of medication for those serious illnesses.
Yeah. And is there able to, or is this where NAMI kind of comes in to help people be able to advocate their doctors how they're feeling? Is that something that's welcomed, or is that something that your body at the time trying to adjust to things?
So, so we offer courses and support groups. We do support groups and courses for what we call peers, which would be the mental health consumers, the clients, the people with the diagnosed illness. And then we also do support groups and courses for the families. And these are great forums in which people can connect with other family members or other peers to get some advice, suggestions, some recommendations on how they can address issues they may be experiencing in relation to mental health. And, you can always reach out to us at our website, namigreatercleveland.org. I think we'll also have on the screen as we wrap up this interview, we'll have a list of phone numbers that people can call, either reach us at NAMI Greater Cleveland, or there it is. You can call the NAMI National Helpline if you're not from the Cleveland area. And we also have resources listed here for crisis and suicide prevention.
Great. So more questions that I just feel like would be very important. Now I want to skip through those up here shortly. So what I'm in crisis, or someone I know is considering suicide, should be like maybe my first step, just kind of walk me through what should I do?
Right. So I'll say that if you encounter yourself in crisis or a loved one is in crisis, if it's a truly lethal situation, then you, of course, want to call 911. But if you are just in an emergency, a mental health crisis where you may be feeling suicidal or someone you know is feeling suicidal, you can also call 988, which is the new nationwide 3-digit suicide prevention lifeline. That's 988. And that number will route you to your nearest 24/7 mobile crisis response team. And this team will coordinate a non-law enforcement response. A team of social workers will be on the phone and then arriving at your location if needed to facilitate a transfer to the hospital or to a crisis stabilization unit. So this is always an option that you have throughout, like I said, it's 24/7, and you can connect with it using that 3-digit 988 number. And that's a resource that not everyone is aware of, that people should be aware of, because suicide and suicidal behavior is one of their main areas of focus.
Oh, okay. So let me get this straight. In the situation, calling the cops first might be the best option. Am I
So
right?
I
Or am
would
I
say
way to
if
the
if
left?
it's a truly lethal situation, like let's say that someone has already taken steps to die by suicide and their life is in imminent danger, call 911. If someone has not yet harmed themselves but is feeling suicidal and they're afraid that something is going to happen if they don't get help, you might want to call 988.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, thank you for that. And is that 988 number, is that just for Ohio, or is the number that's
No, that
across the
is
board?
that is nationwide, and it
Got it.
will route to the corresponding 24/7 mobile crisis response organization that serves that person's county based on the area code and their phone number from the number from which you're calling.
Okay. Okay. And social media, definitely, you know, what's going right now is what's hot. Everybody's on social media and conveyed through social media. Um, so what if I see someone who maybe sending suicidal messages through social? Best way to, um, you confront that situation, help to bring some type of resolve to it.
So, yeah, if you see suicidal content or self-harm content on social media, you can always try to reach out to the person privately and directly if you can. Um, and if you can't reach them and you have reason to believe they're at substantial risk, you can contact local authorities to see if they can assist. And finally, another means by which you can report this information is essentially all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, all have reporting options where you can report that a user may be experiencing suicidal thoughts or self-harm, maybe exhibiting tendencies towards self-harm. So you can report that if you have no other options for connecting with that person.
Okay. So lastly, and I don't know if you've, I think a lot of great information. How can people find help? People find help.
Yeah, so you can always there's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, Services Administration. It's this acronym SAMHSA, SAMHSA. They have a treatment locator that you can search for mental health agencies and substance use rehabilitation programs. You can search by zip code and insurance. You can go to samhsa.org. You can also use the website psychologytoday.com, which has a therapist directory, and you can search by zip code, insurance taken. You can search by the gender or the race or the religion of the therapist if you have particular interest in having a therapist that shares that kind of identity with you. And you can also search by their specializations. So there's many options at your fingertips if you know where to look.
Yes. Yes. Well, that is awesome. I see depression. I remember back when I was a child, a lot of mental health subject, as we, stated, and even previous generations, it was even more to a progression in from generation to generation on how far we long way to go. But I love the fact that you were willing to take time to share this very valuable information, not just with me and Kingdom Talk Live after parties. So please remember to follow King every fourth Saturday, and then join us for the after party where continue to occur. So, Matt, I just want to thank you again. It's been such a privilege, and I'm sure our audience will as well. So thank you again, and rest of your day.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.